topic is Google Earth. Now everybody I'm sure is familiar with Google Maps, and this is basically just an advanced version of that, which provides advanced imagery, so satellite images, maps, terrains. Also provides 3D buildings, which you can go and see a street view and get a very clear shot. It was brought out in mid-2005 by Google by a company called Keyhole. And it's come into the classroom because it's very unique and it's very easy to use. So all students are very entertained by the colours and the vivid images as well. And because computers are just in every classroom these days, that it's very easy to use, it's free to download, and it's just fun for students to access and have fun with it and explore everything. So,
okay, so in our investigation of Google Earth, we've looked at some curriculum links. And we decided to go with Year 5 SOSE, as well as the obvious ICT component that Google Earth has with it. So if we... So with Year 5 ICTs, they're able to identify the inquiry focus. So if you gave them a task on Google Earth, they can use specific tools within the program to identify and use Google Earth as appropriately as possible. It's a way of gathering data and information as opposed to just going online. Google Earth has inbuilt options to find out information. It's a managed structure to search for data, and it also allows them to identify relationships between data and information from a variety of sources. So if they looked up an encyclopedia and went to Google Earth, and hopefully the two sources would match. The next one. So within Year 5 SOSE, it isn't the only curriculum area that Google Earth could be used in, but we thought it was perhaps the most relevant. So within the first one, environments are defined by physical and human dimensions. Just the simple fact that you can view the continents and the large tracts of land within Google Earth allows students to see the physical, so mountains, deserts, and areas where humans have built up, removed trees and things like that is quite clear. There are interactions between people and places. So again, we build cities on rivers. They can see where the river flows, they can see the proximity between where humans have built and the areas of nature. Sustainability is also quite clear on Google Earth. If you look, we'll look at a moment in an example of that. But there's also inbuilt tools within Google Earth that give students information and facts on areas that have been damaged by disasters or other environmental issues. The last one here, that maps have basic spatial concepts, so it takes them away from a typical map into a more 21st century, so GPS style. It still has a compass, they can still move around, you can get grid lines and things like that on there. So it gets them very hands-on with those concepts. Yeah, so just an example of this. The one of them was looking at the impact of humans on the environment. So if we zoom in, I've just tagged Beijing here because it was perhaps the best example. The one drawback of Google Earth, it relies quite heavily on your internet connection. So although it hasn't loaded completely, you can still see there's large areas of green around Beijing, and you look at Beijing and you can clearly tell that that's a human environment just because of the colour. And if you're able to zoom in further, you would eventually get down to the point where you'd be able to see buildings. And you could then compare that to somewhere like the middle of Australia. or the east coast of Australia, where there are large tracts of land that are just simply green. There's very little human interaction, there's very few buildings, and Google Earth does a good job of showing that.
Can you see the pollution in Beijing as well? I thought that's what you might be zooming in on.
You can, there's an option on Google Earth where you can go back in time, and at some point, some of the satellite images, there's quite obviously a cloud over it. Yep, so I'm just going to go through some of the elements of Google Earth that you really need to know to be able to use it effectively. There's 4 main parts. There's toolbar buttons, there's a zoom feature, a views feature, and a layers feature. So with regards to the toolbar buttons, those were the buttons that you would have seen along the top, and I'll just explain them more in detail now. So there was this little pin that you would have seen I'd marked Beijing with. It allows you to put a permanent point on the map. So if you were preparing a lesson beforehand and you wanted to know a town somewhere, you could put a pin there, it would remember where it was, and you could very easily come back and find it again. Within that, you can add pictures, videos, website links, and all sorts of things to allow you to find out more information. Google Earth, there's a lot of, if you Google Google Earth, there's a lot of teachers that have done virtual field trips, and this is the tool, one of the tools that allows them to do this. You can link a variety of places using this path tool, and it will basically move between the places when you want it to. The next one is the shading feature. So if you're doing something on the floods, your students could shade in an area on the map that was affected, or bushfires, or things like that. The record tool allows you to actually record a tour. So you can just hit play, it'll zoom through your places, and you can stand here and talk. And the last one is the ruler feature. So it allows students and teachers to measure the distance between the 2 places, which were the red lines you would have seen on my map.
Just to give you a hands-on idea of exactly how you might apply this in the classroom, we're going to break into like learning stations basically. It'll give you an idea of how possibly you can theme within the classroom, have rotational activities, and we're going to join you as you do it. So you'll see how you could explore Australia as we are in this scenario, but you've also got the opportunity to look at the solar systems using Google Sky. But as we did, I will show you exactly how to use the tools and how the children can create paths and different experiences with it, basically. So we'll hand them around. Does everyone have Google Earth?
So the only basic risks for this is because it's a so detailed image, you can actually pinpoint and see somebody's house. They do blur faces and they blur addresses and all that sort of like number plates and that sort of details, but because it is quite up to date, you can see a house and its development and where it is exactly. So that's probably the only privacy issue and the only really concern we've had with that. In classroom work, because it is very exciting for young children, they can easily get off task and just go and find whatever they want to. And we need them to be focused on what we want them to do, which is why it is good for teachers to just be circulating the room and to be keeping an eye on them and making sure that they're on task.
It is quite simple once you've actually downloaded the program. Obviously you are dependent on the internet, so as you saw we couldn't always zoom in and get the exact detail we wanted to, but generally when you know where you're going, you're able to still run with it within the classroom, so that's okay. Probably the downside is that you do have to download it onto every single computer that you're going to be using it for, so that could be one of the negatives. It is cheap, it's not going to cost the class or the school to download it and install it on the computers, so it's a free resource that you can use across all of the units that you might be doing in the classroom, so it is positive in that way.